night. I was rather surprised to find that she had also brought dessert. I didn't usually get such extravagancies at my nightly meal. It was fucking delicious. She began growing more comfortable as she asked me about my day, and ate her pudding with a smile. I shrugged, really fucking lacking any exciting details where my day was concerned other than her showing up. I told her so. She glanced at me apologetically, sliding the spoon into her mouth. I watched shamelessly as she wrapped her lips around the upside-down spoon and slid it out slowly. I furrowed my brows and shook my head slightly, trying to get my mind out of the fucking gutter for 10 minutes as we ate the remainder of our meal. When we were both finished, I began covering the dishes, a little impatient to thank her properly for the whole thing as I discarded them carelessly onto the floor and turned towards her with a smile. She usually was the one to initiate first contact at night when we made out, or desensitized, or what the fuck ever you want to call it. But I was obviously the eager one as I leaned forward towards her, lifting my hand to her neck, and pulling her face towards mine while struggling to keep my gaze on her sparkling brown eyes. She sighed at my touch as she willingly met me halfway across the space, and pressed her lips to mine gently. Gentle was great and all, but I was a little more enthusiastic as I took her bottom lip into my mouth and sucked on it one notch above gentle. She seemed to be restraining a smile as her hand found its way to the back of my head, tumbling into my hair as she pressed her face closer and darted her tongue out, dragging it across my top lip. I took her into my mouth without hesitation as I lifted my other hand to plunge into all of her shiny fucking curls and pressed against her tongue with mine. As we usually did, our tongues pressed and fought as we both began pulling the other's face closer and tilting our heads to deepen the kiss. She tasted impossibly sweeter as the remnants of the pudding in her mouth made me shove my tongue deeper into her, earning a breathless moan from her as she lifted herself slightly to get closer to me. I drew my tongue back from her mouth, pulling away from her lips and leaning back enough for her to sit in my lap like she liked. And I was really looking forward to that shit as she got up on her knees and cleared the space between us by moving to straddle me. And I fucking groaned aloud as her chest entered my view against my will, forcing my gaze on it as she ran her fingers through my hair. Her breasts were mashed together and up, forming the most delicious-looking cleavage that any red shirt had ever seen. And if any other motherfucker ever saw it there like that. I brought my hands to her sides, rubbing them slowly while easing her to sit fully on my lap. Her brown eyes were already hooded with lust as she finally rested on top of me, breathing a little heavily and running her little hands through my hair in a gesture so relaxing that my eyes wanted to close. I sighed as she licked her red lips, moving one hand from her side to cup her cheek. This shit was getting out of hand. I had to beat down the hormones for a moment as I gazed into her eyes and caressed her cheek softly with one hand and rested my other on her hip. "I have a present for you," I whispered inches from her face, staring into her eyes as they stared back at me blankly. She halted her movements in my hair as she blinked at me.
Valentine's Day was created by greedy executives at greeting card corporations to boost a low first quarter sales trend.
She whispered in a sharp, matter-of-fact voice. I quirked an eyebrow at her. "Just when I thought you couldn't get any fucking sexier, you go talking dirty to me about first quarter sales trends." I smirked sarcastically, while I rubbed her hip with my thumb. It was more of a question, as I didn't quite comprehend her cynicism. She got my point as she sighed softly, hunching her shoulders and stroking my hair once again.
"I didn't get you a Valentine's Day gift,"
she frowned in a remorseful tone. I snickered softly at her attempt to ease her guilt. "I didn't get you one either," I stated honestly while rubbing her cheek softly with my thumb. She eyed me with a confused expression as I rolled my eyes. "I just so happened to be giving it to you on Valentine's Day." I shrugged, sliding my hand from cheek to her neck as I swept her curls back. She looked pleased as she smiled at me and nodded. I chuckled as I rolled my eyes once again. "Close your eyes," I ordered softly, because I was about to eye her so fucking shamelessly that I couldn't bear to be seen doing it. She complied, allowing her eyes to flutter closed as I reached to the bedside table and slid the drawer open, having to lean over a bit to reach inside. When I pulled out the item, I closed the drawer, finally allowing my gaze to lower to her chest as I rubbed her hip. It was just so fucking sexy that I stared at it for a moment before I remembered what I was doing. I shook my head once more to rid it of the hormones before I lifted the necklace to her throat, wrapping it around and furrowing my brows at the difficulty of clasping it behind her. When it was finally secured, I slid my fingers down the length of it until they rested on the silver pendant that was now hanging on her pale chest. I smirked, happy that I finally had something on my girl. I had her ring on me after all. And the gesture wasn't entirely possessive. The pendant reminded me of her when I spotted it, and I knew I wanted it on her. Two horse heads facing each other in the shape of a heart. Their manes flared out to the sides in a delicate yet bold filigree. She opened her eyes as I removed my fingers from her skin, looking down to inspect it while her curls created a veil around the sides of her face. She dropped a hand from my hair, using it to finger the silver pendant softly.
"All the pretty little horses,"
she whispered down at it with a smile before glancing up at me quizzically. I nodded. Shit like that used to remind me of something else. But nowadays that song only reminded me of my girl laying in bed next to me and humming me to sleep. She smiled brightly and leaned in to kiss me on the lips sweetly. I sighed as her warm lips met mine, wrapping my arms around her waist and pulling her closer as her hands slid up my arms and neck and returned to my hair. She pulled my face to hers tightly, tilting her head and gently forcing her tongue back into my mouth with a sigh. We resumed where we left off as I pushed my tongue into her mouth eagerly, hugging her waist tightly and growing harder at the feel of her cleavage pressed against my chest. My breathing deepened as I tried to stifle the surge of lust by moving one of my hands up her back to stroke her hair gently. My girl never was fond of stifling lust. She pulled my face closer, tilting her face further to plunge her tongue deeper into my mouth. There was still a remnant of the sweet taste in her mouth, making me lick and suck on her tongue as she shifted her hips against me with a moan. I groaned breathlessly into her mouth, moving my hands to her hips and holding them firmly, willing her to stay still as I battled with her tongue. It was too early for that shit. I could feel her fingers begin to weave in my hair, but was both disappointed and relieved when she didn't make a fist and pull it. We began panting into each other's mouths as we both pressed ourselves closer, our tongues battling for dominance as I held her hips and rubbed them with my thumbs. After a few moments of breathless kissing, I pried my lips from hers, moving them down her jaw, while gulping in her scent, and fucking dying to keep going, until I reached her breasts. The silver chain of her necklace helped me bat down the surge of lust as I kissed and licked my way up to her ear. She panted into the crook of my neck, arcing her chest into me in a silent plea that I knew all too well by then. She fucking wanted it. I halted my lips on her neck, still panting a bit as I moved my hand from her hair to her side slowly, rubbing up and down in a relaxing gesture that probably wasn't needed for her anymore, as we both rested our face in each other's necks. She sighed into my skin as I began moving my hand to her front, sliding it up her ribs in between us and halting just before it reached her breasts. I gave her a chance to protest as I rubbed her stomach softly with my thumb and breathed against her neck. She answered with another slight arch, answering my question and willing me to continue. I didn't hesitate to move my hand up and cupped her breast with my palm, halting the movement momentarily to make sure the safe word wasn't coming. It never did, of course. The technique was